In February of 2000, the internet broke. Not all of it, but the parts that mattered most. Yahoo, the undisputed king of the web, suddenly went dark. Then Amazon, the future of commerce, blinked out of existence. Then eBay, CNN and Dell. It was as if someone was systematically flipping the off switch on the world's biggest websites. The stock market panicked. The FBI launched a massive investigation. Everyone assumed this was the work of a sophisticated criminal syndicate, or maybe even a hostile nation state launching the first salvo in a new kind of war. They were wrong. The person responsible for bringing the global economy to its knees wasn't in a government bunker or a mob headquarters. He was a 15-year-old kid, sitting in his parents' house in a quiet suburb of Montreal, Canada, tapping away at a keyboard. And he was just getting started. This is the story of Mafiaboy, the teenager who held the internet hostage, and in doing so, accidentally showed the world just how fragile it really was. To understand the sheer chaos of these attacks, you have to remember what the internet was like in the year 2000. The dot-com bubble was at its absolute peak. The web felt like a new, invincible frontier of limitless potential. Companies were worth billions of dollars based on nothing more than a .com at the end of their name. And at the top of this digital mountain was Yahoo. Before Google, Yahoo was everything. It was the search engine, the news source, the email provider. It was the homepage for millions. For Yahoo to simply vanish was unthinkable. It was like the sun not rising. On February 7th, 2000, the unthinkable happened. Employees at Yahoo headquarters watched in horror as their servers were overwhelmed by a tidal wave of digital traffic. It was a flood of junk data, 1 billion digital voices, all screaming at the front door at once, so loudly that no legitimate user could get in. The site sputtered, slowed, and then, for 3 agonizing hours, it was completely gone. The world was baffled. But in the shadowy corners of the internet, in underground chat rooms, one person knew exactly what was happening. A high school student named Michael Calce, known online by the handle Mafiaboy. This wasn't some accident. This was an attack he had codenamed Project Rivolta. That's Italian for rebellion. But how could a teenager possibly muster enough power to knock the world's biggest website offline? He didn't have a supercomputer in his basement. He had something better, an army. An army of computers he didn't own. Calce had spent months quietly breaking into the networks of multiple universities. These institutions had powerful servers and lightning-fast connections, and their security was, to put it mildly, lacking. He installed a piece of malicious software on dozens of these machines, turning them into sleeper agents, or bots. They sat there, dormant, waiting for a command from their master. When Calce launched Project Rivolta, he sent a single order, and his entire botnet, this network of hijacked university computers, woke up and aimed all of its firepower directly at Yahoo. This is called a distributed denial of service attack, or DDoS. You aren't breaking into the target. You're just making so much noise at the front door that the building becomes unusable. And in 2000, this kind of attack, on this scale, was revolutionary. Most companies had never seen anything like it. They had no idea how to defend against it. Yahoo was just the first domino. For Mafiaboy, this was about establishing dominance. And what happened next proves it wasn't just about technical skill. It was about ego. Shortly after the Yahoo attack, another e-commerce site, buy.com, went down. But here's where the story gets complicated. Calce has always denied being responsible for that one. He claims a rival hacker did it to taunt him, to challenge his power. The message was clear. You took down Yahoo? Big deal. I can do it too. This perceived challenge lit a fire under him. He wasn't going to be one-upped. If his rivals were going to play in the big leagues, he was going to own the stadium. So he set his sights on the next target, a name we all know, eBay. The world's auction house went dark. Then came CNN, the 24-hour news giant, silenced. Then Amazon, the bookstore that was already on its way to becoming the everything store, was knocked offline. The internet was under siege. With each successful attack, Mafiaboy's reputation in the hacker underground exploded. He was a legend, a prodigy. But in the real world, the consequences were spiraling out of control. The stock prices of these tech giants tumbled. The combined financial damage was estimated to be well over $1 billion in lost revenue and market capitalization. Think about that for a second. A high school sophomore, fueled by teenage angst and a rivalry in an online chat room, was causing a level of economic disruption that terrorists and criminals could only dream of. He wasn't doing it for money. He wasn't a political activist. He was doing it for bragging rights. He was doing it to prove he could. And that, right there, is the classic flaw of the brilliant but reckless mind. The need for recognition. The ego. And it would be that exact same ego that would lead to his downfall. The FBI and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police were in a frenzy. They were hunting a ghost. The attacks were distributed, meaning the traffic came from all over the place, from the university servers Calce had compromised. Tracing it back to a single source was a nightmare. The investigators were hitting dead end after dead end. They knew they were dealing with a skilled operator, but they had no idea who or where he was. They needed a lucky break. Mafiaboy gave them one. In his wave of attacks, he had also targeted Dell computers. But unlike Yahoo or Amazon, Dell didn't make a big public announcement about their outage. Maybe they fixed it quickly. Maybe they just wanted to avoid the bad press. For whatever reason, the world didn't know Dell had been a victim. But Mafiaboy knew. And it was eating him alive. What's the point of pulling off a masterful hack if nobody knows you did it? So he did what any teenager desperate for validation would do. He went online to brag. He logged into his favorite IRC chat room, the digital clubhouse for hackers, and started talking. He casually mentioned taking down Dell's website. Most people in the chat probably thought he was lying, just another kid trying to sound tough. But someone in that chat room was paying very close attention. The FBI had informants and analysts monitoring these exact channels, looking for any clue. His boast about the unreported Dell attack was the thread they could finally pull. It was specific. It was a piece of information only the attacker would know with certainty. Investigators, working with security analysts like Michael Lyle, now had a lead. They started cross-referencing logs, tracing the digital breadcrumbs of the Dell attack back through the internet's complex wiring. The trail led them from servers in the US, back to the compromised university networks, and finally to a single IP address, a digital fingerprint originating from a small, unassuming house in Île-Bizarde, Quebec, the home of Michael Calce. The net was closing in. The world's most wanted cybercriminal wasn't a man in a mask. He was a kid who probably had a math test the next morning. In April of 2000, police raided his home. The global manhunt was over. But the moment they put him in handcuffs, a whole new problem began. What do you do with a 15-year-old who caused more than $1 billion in damage? There was no precedent for this. The legal system was completely unprepared. How do you sentence a minor for a crime of this magnitude, especially when his motive wasn't personal gain, but a misguided quest for status? The prosecution pushed for a harsh penalty, arguing that the sheer scale of the economic damage demanded it. They wanted to make an example out of him. His defense argued that he was just a curious kid who got in over his head, someone who didn't and couldn't fully comprehend the real-world consequences of his actions in the virtual world. The debate raged in the media. Was he a criminal mastermind or just a reckless teenager? The eventual sentence shocked many. In September 2001, Michael Calce was sentenced to 8 months in open custody, essentially a youth group home. He also received 1 year of probation, was restricted from using the internet, and had to pay a small amount of restitution. 8 months for a crime that shook the foundations of the internet economy. To many in the business world, it was a laughable slap on the wrist. They argued it set a dangerous precedent, telling would-be hackers that the reward of fame far outweighed the minimal risk of punishment. But to others, it was a measured response, acknowledging his age and intent. This controversy forced governments around the world, including in Canada and the United States, to completely rewrite their cybercrime laws, creating new, tougher legislation specifically for cases like this. But the true legacy of Mafiaboy isn't about his sentence. It's about what his attacks revealed. He exposed the shocking fragility of the dot-com boom. He proved that the giants of the internet were built on a foundation that a single determined individual could shatter. The year 2000 became known as the year of the DDoS, and it was a brutal wake-up call. Cybersecurity went from being an afterthought for IT departments to a multi-billion-dollar industry and a boardroom-level priority. Companies started investing heavily in DDoS mitigation and threat intelligence. In a strange, destructive way, a 15-year-old kid from Canada forced the entire internet to grow up and get serious about its own security. And what about Michael Calce himself? After serving his time, he didn't fade into obscurity. He made a choice that nobody saw coming. He decided to switch sides. The poacher became the gamekeeper. He wrote a book about his experiences and began a new career as a cybersecurity consultant, a white hat hacker. Today, he gets paid by major corporations to help them find vulnerabilities in their systems and build defenses against the very types of attacks he once pioneered. It's a redemption arc that's almost as unbelievable as his original crime. The story of Mafiaboy is more than just a wild tale from the early days of the internet. It's a crucial origin story for the digital world we live in now. The tactics he used have been refined and amplified 1,000 times over. The botnet he built with a few dozen university servers has evolved into massive networks like the MiWi botnet, which used millions of insecure smart devices, cameras, routers, even baby monitors, to launch attacks far larger than anything Calce could have imagined. His legacy is a constant reminder that the greatest threat to our hyper-connected world often isn't a complex piece of code, but simple human ego, curiosity, and the desire for recognition. The tools change, but the motivation remains the same. So what do you think? Was his sentence a just punishment for a teenager who got in over his head, or a dangerous failure of the justice system? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And if you enjoy deep dives into the stories that shaped our digital world, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching.